Hello, all you reinventors. This is Lesley Jane Seymour, and I am the founder of CoveyClub and of this podcast. And we are here today to talk to a researcher, writer, who is talking about how women can reinvent their ascent and their sort of the look at how to get ahead in corporate life. And she's done a lot of research and she's found really interesting stuff. The name of the book that she just put out is called The Four Jobs Club: How Smart Women Care for It All. Kids, Aging Parents, Home, and Career. We're all dealing with that. And let me tell you a little bit about Kathryn. Kathryn is a career coach who empowers women to always find work that fits their lives for long-term financial security. She helps women navigate four big jobs, as we said, and she is the author of two books, and the Four Jobs Club will be launching this month. So here is Kathryn. We have wonderful tips and tricks for you, so be sure to stay tuned to the end because these are tricks that don't cost a lot and don't require a huge lift, but may change your life. So here's Kathryn. So Kathryn, wonderful to have you with us. This is fantastic.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
It's right up my alley. Women's issues, especially with jobs, especially with where we're headed right now. And my major concern, which is women's economic safety. And that's been my whole thing, my entire career. So let's start out with, first of all, just so people know who you are and where you grew up and all that, just give us a 2-second background of who you are, where you grew up, what you did, and then we'll talk about why you wrote the book.
Sure. I grew up in Connecticut and I went to school outside of Boston, and I heard on my college campus Gloria Steinem talk about, women can have it all, and sort of dating myself because that was back in like 1980. And there really was that feeling that we could have it all. But that lasted for only a couple of years because then we all got into the reality of having a job and getting married and having a family and all of that. So I have kind of come full circle on that. I have had lots of traditional roles in my career, but I've also had several entrepreneurial ventures. I've worked part-time, I've worked freelance, I've been a consultant. I've basically worked in every possible way that you can work. But it's always with the eye to flexibility. And I decided back in 2012 that I wanted to help women who had left the workforce and wanted to get back in. And
Okay.
uh, and so that was, I was one of the first to really be talking about that and help those women, but then realize that women at all ages and stages, whether they stay in or not, really need help navigating, the various stages of work and life.
Right.
And so that's what I've been doing for most of my career.
And did you try to have it all?
I did, and I do. Um,
So why do you think it's a myth?
because I think that it's just not framed properly. I think that you can have it all if you have flexibility. If you have a very rigid job, where you have to be in the office and you can barely leave your desk, and you have to travel a lot and you have to work 80 hours a week and, all of that, then it's difficult.
Right.
But my husband always told me when I was younger and had younger kids, when I'd be feeling guilty about everything, he would say, "Yeah, but you're one of few people that has the choice of working or not, and he said most of the women in this country have to work and they make it work no matter what. So, I just think it's the way it's framed.
Okay. So why'd you write the book and why now?
I wrote the book because I had written a first book called Ambition Redefined. So I got on this bandwagon that not every woman has to reach the C-suite. Not every woman has to lean in between, according to the Power Sisterhood and Sheryl Sandberg. I said, if you want to lean in between for a while or forever, that's okay because, employers need all kinds of bench strength and not everybody, there aren't enough jobs at the top for everyone anyway. And
You
so,
need the Indians as well as the chiefs, right? You can't,
yeah,
everybody can't be a chief, right?
yeah, absolutely. And so my first book was all about defining your own ambition and success and really letting women know that there were so many ways to work now in a more flexible way. And then the pandemic hit, and obviously everybody was home. And that created a lot of chaos, but it also created a lot of flexibility because women were home. But women started leaving in bigger droves than before with the Great Resignation.
Right.
And so then I was thinking, gee, all these women who reach the C-suite, they're mothers, they have families, they have to take care of aging parents and their households and their jobs. So how did they do it? How did they stay in? And like you, the underlying factor of or the theme running through my work has always been long-term financial security for women and trying to keep women in the workforce so
Mhm.
that they stay on track for financial security.
Yeah.
So I decided that I wanted to ask these C-suite women, how did you do it? And I got 50 of them to talk to me. I didn't want to do a profile on each of them.
Right.
What I wanted were their hardcore, easy to implement tips and strategies and what, in all these various categories of the four jobs, how did you do it? And another driving factor before that had been that I did a survey, a national survey, and I found out that women at the mid-level and rising up the ranks really do not feel that women in power are helping them, are kind of reaching back and saying, this is how I did it. And these are the resources that I used. And this is how it becomes possible for you to have the bandwidth to stay in. So that's why I wrote the book.
And is that true for women in their 30s and 40s? Because I know that was true with the women who went ahead of us and did not reach back. But you're finding that our group is not reaching back to the people below us?
Not as much. You
Oh,
know,
okay.
I
That's
mean,
sad.
definitely
That's
was more of a problem
heartbreaking.
in our generation, but they're still very much feeling that way. And one of the myths that I busted with writing the book is that people think, oh, well, you talk to 50 women in the C-suite and they have big jobs, so they have big salaries and they can afford to, have hot and cold running help. And they're like Sheryl Sandberg and, you
Right.
know, and what was really great to find out is that these women are very regular. They go grocery shopping, they make it a point to get home for dinner. They're often cooking dinner. Some of them don't even have a cleaning person once a week.
Wow. I couldn't do
Um,
that. That's
no, me
impossible.
either.
Yeah. Ooh,
And
that's too
they're
much.
doing all the things that, everyday women do. But so the point is, they're not throwing money at the four jobs. They're throwing
Nice.
organization at the four jobs. They're bringing their business skills home and they are finding ways to structure, have processes, really make everything run more smoothly, but they're using their business brain to do that.
What are the four jobs briefly? And
Well,
how do they differ? I was reminded of 1989 when Arlie Hochschild wrote The Second Shift. It was like we had two jobs. Now
right.
you're needing four jobs. It's like
Yeah.
in 10 years, it's going to be six jobs. It just keeps multiplying.
Well, I mean, I'm just putting a finer point on it.
Okay.
I'm sure that, the two jobs probably encompass what I'm talking about, but
Okay.
I wanted to really emphasize there are four distinct things. There's your paid job, and then there's caring for children, caring for aging parents,
Yeah, that was new. Yeah.
and caring for your household.
Yeah.
So, you
Yeah. Yeah.
and most of that, despite what anybody says about, men stepping up more than their fathers and all of that, and they are, but the majority of those four jobs is still on the shoulders of women.
Yeah. Yep. Um, so here's the question for you. How are these jobs going to get harder in a less female friendly environment, which is where we're headed at this point? Less people are already dropping their DEI. They're talking about, we don't need any help anymore. We don't need any special accommodations. Are you seeing that? Are you concerned or no?
You know, they may drop some of the DEI programs. I'm not seeing a lot of that yet. But I don't feel like they're going to drop the sort of grassroots support that they have for women through the employee resource groups, for example. Just about every employer, whether it's nonprofit or for profit, at large or small, they have a women's group. They have a parenting group. So I still see a tremendous amount of support through those groups, which I don't think are going to be cut through DEI. And I mean, look at what Melinda Gates, she just announced the 150 million or whatever she just said that she's going to um, or she invested in women in the workplace. And a lot of that is for caregiving. And I think that corporations will rally around that. Um, and no, I mean, I don't see doom and
Not
gloom
worried.
in
Okay.
that.
A lot of women that I know are very concerned about losing ground and losing and finding a more less female friendly workplace. But we'll have to see where we go to. We'll have to see.
Right.
What surprised you in the research for the book?
Well, I mean, again, it was just how normal they all were and what regular lives they led. I I was really struck by how close they are to their kids, because that's another thing that you think, well, the mothers aren't around. And
Right.
I heard so many stories of how their kids showed them and told them that they were so proud of their mothers, for all that they had accomplished and all that they were able to give to the family. And the other thing that was so interesting is that almost to a kid, all the children of these women are really leading such interesting lives. I mean, a lot of them have followed their mothers and fathers into sort of corporate America, but they were doing everything, and it really showed that it matters to your kids.
Mm.
That you're setting those examples, and also there was a lot about sharing responsibility, not only with your husband or partner,
But with the kids.
but sharing responsibilities with your kids, because
Mm.
that's the other thing. You think these kids of privileged households would, have everyone making their beds for them. But it's, they've really instilled work ethic and responsibility.
Did you discard the women who had the phalanxes of help? Because you obviously must have run into those, there's tons of them.
Yeah, there are tons of them, but um,
And, because I'm surprised that that many are that down to earth. I'm just wondering, did you have to dig to find these women? Like, was it everybody you just happened to interview, or did you have to discard?
I think a lot of them self-selected,
Ah, okay.
in
Okay.
the sense that if they weren't feeling like they were, sort of at that grassroots level of trying to make it all work and on their own and with their partners. I mean, I don't think that the Sheryl Sandberg types wanted to be participating.
Okay, so self-selection then.
Yeah.
Okay. But they do exist, is what you're saying. They may not be everybody,
Yeah.
but they do exist.
But my sense is, and I may be wrong, but my sense is that they exist mostly on both coasts. There are a lot of Wall Street women like that. There are a lot of very senior level tech women like that. But in between, and where a lot of the women that I interviewed come from, um, it's just sort of basic human values,
Mhm.
and humbleness that I encountered.
Mhm. So what didn't surprise you in the research? What were you unsurprised by?
Well, I guess I was unsurprised by the fact that, each woman could tell a story about when when the four jobs got the best of them, where, they all had a story of, someone got sick in their family, or their child was having some trouble. There were all kinds of stories. And what another thing, and I knew that would happen, that I would find that because, we're all just human. But the great thing is, and the example that they set for other women, is that they said it's okay to step back for a while and to take that lateral move, or to take a sabbatical for 3 months, or leave the workforce for 2 years, whatever it was. They said sometimes that is the answer. And a lot of women do that. But what I always caution, and what I said in the book, and what they also said, is that if you're going to step back, if you're going to say, I'm going to leave for a couple of years, you have to be really businesslike about it. You have to say, I'm going to step back for 3 years. And I'm going to keep in touch with my boss, and I'm going to, try to return or whatever, and be very specific about it. Because if you're not, the couple of years, and I see this as a career coach, when women come to me and say, I just can't do this anymore, they say, I'm going to leave for a couple of years. But women stay out for an average of 12.
Yeah, I saw that. They say they think it's going to be 2 or 3, right? But
Yeah.
then you're into raising the kids, right?
Well, you're into life.
Yeah,
Just keeps happening. Then
right,
somebody gets sick. Then your son can't read. I mean, it just
right,
goes on, and there's
right,
never a good time to go
right,
back.
right. It's never, that's what I've learned in general. It's never a good time for anything in life.
Right,
You just have to do it. No
right,
good time to have a baby, no good time to leave your job, no good time to go back. Yeah, if you're always looking for a good time, you will never do anything, right? It's just
right.
not, it's not there. So let's talk about the gender gap and what you saw. We see from the last election a growing gender gap between some men and women. Did you notice anything with this? Did you notice are women still, taking the burden of everything? I mean, I think the last time I looked at the numbers, the men were doing, it's something like 20 minutes more. It's not a lot. And yet we see the gender gap getting bigger and, and women being so accomplished that it seems to be having trouble out there in the world for men who are feeling unaccomplished. Did you run
Right.
into any of that?
Well, I mean, on the first point, um, I think that if you interviewed men, they would take offense to the fact that they're, well, a lot of men, they would take offense to the fact that they're not helping. And, and that's different than our generation where they weren't expected to help.
No, they were not. Oh, God, I can't even believe it.
Yeah. But help, this is the thing, it's a semantics problem. It's and I just did a presentation to a big consulting firm, and this young man was part of the conversation, and he said, I came to this presentation because I wanted to see how I can help my wife more. And he said he has four young children. And so the CEO and I, who were doing the presenting, we were like, oh, well, that's nice. That's earnest, that he's saying that he wants to help his wife more. But then we very gently said, but they're your kids
I was
too.
just going to say, aren't they your children too?
Yeah.
Like, why
And
is it helping?
yeah, and
Or babysitting. We used to say
yeah,
when the art was
yeah,
like, can you babysit the kids? It's
yeah,
like, no one says that to you. No one
right,
says, can you babysit the kids tonight? It's your kids, and could you babysit them as to your husband?
yeah. And the
But
same
still
thing with
help.
the house, helping around the house. Well, it's your house too. And so in terms of the gender gap, yes, women are still shouldering most of everything of the four jobs. But it's so much about the mental load
Yeah,
because,
yeah, yeah.
we go to work and we're doing our job, but then we've got 18 other things going through. Did I call the doctor for the doctor's appointment? Did I make the camp applications? Blah, blah, blah. What's for dinner? All that stuff. Men go to work and they go
I
to
think
work.
about work.
They think about work. So you don't need your husband or partner to help you. You need that person to own stuff.
Yeah, own it. Yeah,
It's not help, it's own.
yeah.
And I don't know if you've heard of the great book Fair Play that Eve Rodsky wrote, and she's aligned with Reese Witherspoon. But she actually created a system where you divide all the 100 different tasks that relate to the family and the household. And the whole idea is to own them, own the tasks. So then you can go to work, I can go to work, and I know that those five things, I don't have to think about it because
Right.
that's being taken care of.
Right. And that is hopefully if you're managing in the workplace, hopefully you are giving people tasks to own. Hopefully
Right,
you are not just letting them babysit a task and you're going to do it anyway. That's not inefficient, but that's
right.
interesting. So are you seeing, I mean, do you see any gender gap in turn or age gap in terms? It sounds like the young men have not come along very far.
Well,
Even
I think they're doing a lot more.
okay,
Obviously, but I think it's still in the helping column.
still in the helping column. Okay.
And I don't think that's bad. I mean, certainly it's good that they're doing more, but it's not reducing the overall mental load.
Right. Yeah, I like the fact I learned about mental load. We did not talk about that
Hmm.
when we were growing up. We were just stuck with it. We had all loads were us, right?
Right.
And I remember my husband worked on Wall Street, and his famous thing was that one of the guys there he had something like six children, and he bragged about never ever changing a diaper in his life. And now you're like horrified by that, right? It's just
Right.
that's obnoxious and disgusting. So let's talk about simple tips because you really focused, which I like, on actual tips and tricks, and you call them trade-offs. talk about what's a trade-off versus a tip, and then we'll talk about some of the most interesting tips that you've found and learned that people who are listening can pick up and use today.
Well, I'm going to start with my favorite tip, and that is uh, the woman who's the chief financial officer of U.S. Steel. She said that, like all these women did, said that women will come to her on her team and they'll say they're really struggling blending work and life. And they'll say they think that they have to leave. And excuse me, and her motto and how she advises them is to say, don't let a problem that could potentially be solved in 30 days
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
up upend a career that could last for 30 years.
Yeah. No, I
And
thought that was very, very clever.
yeah, because when you think about it, um, and I don't think there's any shame in this. When you're really stressed out from the four jobs, you get to a very emotional point. And And so there's usually one thing that upsets the apple cart. And it may not be something that is, extremely dire, but it does push you to thinking that you're going to leave. And, all the women in the book were really saying that they're counseling women on their team to really make sure that you have considered all the resources. Some companies have tutoring resources when your son's having trouble
Oh,
reading.
interesting. No, I did not know that. Wow, we had to do all that on our own. Interesting.
Yeah. And what can the school offer? What can the community offer? What can you pay for on a reasonable basis? So there was this overriding theme of stop, take a breath, and see, what kind of resources are out there for you.
What about the maternal guilt, which is, you mentioned it where people said, oh, how do you feel that a nanny's raising your children? And that woman said, she's not raising my children. She's helping me raise my children. Um, how is that playing out? Because for me, that was the reason why I tried to do it all is because I didn't want to feel that guilt. And that made it even harder.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what I learned in the book was that the more that the women got their children involved in their work and understanding their work, the less guilty that they felt. And and getting involved doesn't mean, going to the office, although a lot of the women did bring their kids to the office and not just on bring your daughter to work day or whatever that was. They would bring them there periodically. They'd bring them there for company events and presentations. They would make a point of introducing their kids to their colleagues. And then at dinner, they would talk about, today Mary did this and John did that. And the kids would start to understand, what they were doing. They would, try to explain it in kid terms. If they were working at an investment firm, they would say, we help people buy houses, or, if they were a lawyer, we help people follow rules and laws, whatever. And and so, if a kid is watching their parents leave the house every single day to go to work, well, what's work?
Right.
Work just seems like this big black hole.
Right.
And so they would, talk a lot, involve their kids a lot. They would also say that you have a job and I have a job. One woman who was or is the founder of Beauty Counter, she would talk about all the jobs that she had in her life, to be mother, to be wife, to be daughter, all this stuff. And she would tell her kids all of this. And, one woman said, I used to have to sign on back on my computer after dinner. And instead of feeling guilty about that, she said, I would remind my kids that they were doing their job too. They were doing their homework.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, I use that as well. Interesting. No, and kids, what's really funny is my daughter, when she would come and hang out at Mary Claire, for instance, and clean the beauty closet and all that, at one point she turned to me and she said, when you're done with this job, can I have it? I was like, no, that's like a whole nother thing. You're not allowed to do that. Can't pass this along to you. But she loved the idea, and she's now an orthodontist. So it's very,
Oh,
very far afield from
yes,
what
yes,
we were
yes.
doing here. So is there any other thing that you would like people to know about the book before we finish? We're almost at the end.
Just that everything that's in there, there are more than 200 tips. And, most of them are no cost, and some of them are low cost. But it's nothing is rocket science. It's just simple things that could make a difference as you're trying to manage it all.
And where can everybody find you? And obviously the book is everywhere, but where can they find you, Kathryn, if they want to find you?
At KathrynSollman.com. And the book, yes, it's on Amazon and all bookstores.
Cool. And are you on social?
Yes.
Okay,
LinkedIn, Instagram,
great.
mostly.
Well, thank you for joining us. I so appreciate it.
Yeah, that was great.
So thank you for joining us in this podcast. I hope it was helpful. I hope you found some easy tips and tricks you could pick up and some insights that might help you run your life in a better way. I will say that doing those 4 jobs for me was exhausting and difficult. And I'm glad that my kids are launched, and I'm glad that I have my own business because, boy, I look back and sometimes I wonder how I even got through it all. I really do. I really admire anybody on that stage of life where it is so overwhelming and you just put your head down and get through it. It's hard. Hopefully you can get through it in a good way. And hopefully this book will help you. So hopefully you've learned something. If you have, please follow the podcast, give us some stars. Also give us a nice mention in Apple Podcasts that helps other people find us if you can. And then mosey on over to CoveyClub.com and check out all the free info we have for you. If you're thinking of, we have leadership info, we have reinvention, restarting, rethinking, everything you could imagine over at CoveyClub.com. Check us out. And we'll see you next time.